to the Knights of the Dawn podcast. We're super excited to have you here today, where we talk about all things Brandon Mull. This is episode 2 of Book 1 of Fablehaven. And so today we're going to be talking about chapters 5 through 8 of the book. And this is where the magic really starts happening.
This is the fun part, because we actually get to talk about what the book is about.
Without worrying about spoilers or anything.
Yeah, so...
We were trying to be cryptic in the last one, not, do too much.
Yeah, this chapter starts with Chapter 5, Journal of Secrets, and it's where Kendra finishes opening the Journal of Secrets that had all of the keys to it, and at the end of the book, she doesn't find anything in there until the end of the book, where it just says 3 words. Drink the milk. Yes, drink the milk. Which is very cryptic, and she's like, okay, what does this mean? But eventually she figures out that it means the milk that Dale had been leaving in the yard.
And being very suspicious about.
And being very suspicious. But then Kendra uses Seth as her guinea pig to try the milk, because she's like, well, if it has diseases, I don't want it, you know? And so he tries it, and he starts freaking out about all these insects, and he's like, look at all the fairies. And she's like, what? And so she tries it, and lo and behold, there's fairies and magical creatures. And so then they go in with Grandpa, and he tells them all about the magical preserve that Fablehaven, which is the name of the place they are at, actually is, with all these magical creatures and magic, like fairies, satyrs, unicorns, centaurs, you know, anything. All of these magical creatures. So this whole new world opens up to them.
Yeah. So in this bit, we really do get into the world building of what is Fablehaven. So it's like a magical preserve that where you can kind of experience these creatures in a safe environment. Well, as safe as you can get.
Safe is questionable.
Relatively safe. Okay, I'll take that back.
It's more safety for the magical creatures.
As we find out it's not so safe for the humans later on in this section.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we go through the next couple. We get some fairy lore about what they can do, what they can't do, what is not good for them. And Seth has lots of consequences. He keeps being Seth. Like, I swear, he's so smart, but he's so dumb. And he makes a very innocent, to be fair, very innocent mistake.
Yeah.
But he pays the price for it.
Yes.
Yeah. So today we're going to be going into some of the themes and, like, of world building that we get. Like, because it's really interesting. It's simple, but
it is super interesting.
Yeah. So getting into, like, my first kind of thing here, Brandon Mull, he really just, like, he makes it, like, it makes so much sense, because everything's invisible. Like,
yeah.
Like, it's, like, of course we can't see them, they're all invisible. And it's kind of funny, so, like, unless you drink the milk, you cannot see the fairies, the magical creatures. I think it's hilarious just how he just explains it all away with such a simple plot device.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it makes sense. Of course, magical milk helps you see fairies. Why wouldn't it?
I mean, yeah. I mean, wonder who figured that out first. I do like the way that it's just kind of like setting it up, because first of all, it's just like, drink the milk, and you're like, why? But then, you get your little brother to try first. That's the real point. But I just like kind of like the mysterious of it, that just kind of led up into this big reveal of like, well, maybe not big, you know. If you're at the back of the book, it's probably not a big reveal, but it's still like a cool thing of being like, oh my gosh, this whole magical world. And I'm like, man, I want to like go to like some relative's house and then drink some milk and then enter a magical world. Like, that's pretty cool.
And I really like how Grandpa Sorensen, he mentions like this is not the first time he's tried this test.
Yeah.
Like, he mentions that he's had some of Seth and Kendra's cousins over. And he's like, yeah, I gave them the same puzzles. I made it no more difficult, no more easy there than I did for you two.
Mm-hmm.
But he knows if like the right people are interested, they'll figure it out.
Exactly.
Kendra had the brains and the persistence to get through the puzzles. Seth had the gall and the determination and dumb bravery to try it out. But like, they both had the combination that made it work, that made it so that they could pierce the veil, for lack of a better metaphor.
Sorry, I was laughing because when you said dumb bravery, I thought of McGonagall's and 10 points for sheer dumb luck. That's what it made me think of.
That's literally what it is, though. That's literally what it is, though.
So yeah, that's what I thought of.
Yes. They were dumb enough to try, and somehow it worked out.
Yeah.
That's Seth 90% of the time, let's be honest.
Mm-hmm. But what I really love about, especially like Journal of Secrets chapter, is that when Grandpa is like explaining to them about the world, he tells them of the rules of the world and how these sanctuaries were created with treaties where all of the inhabitants of them agree to this treaty, and that's what binds all of the magic together to make it a safe enough place for everything to coexist. And that there are rules, and with rules, if you break them, there come consequences. And I really like that he establishes this as kind of like part of living there, because obviously if there's magical creatures, there's danger with it. And so he's really trying to instill within Seth and Kendra that they really need to take this seriously, because this isn't make-believe anymore. This has become a real world.
He's 50% successful. All jokes aside, I really like one of his quotes here. Like, when he's really explaining it, he's like, speaking broadly, they are based on the law of the harvest, the law of retribution. If you do not bother the creatures, they will not bother you. That is what affords you so much protection when you are unable to see them. You can't interact with them, so they generally behave likewise. But now that Seth and Kendra can see them, the danger's increased. Like, the protections can even be annulled by just going where you're not supposed to go.
Yeah.
Something that could be very problematic for Seth. Like, Grandpa even tells him, like, you went into some sketchy areas, son.
Yeah.
And they could have turned out much worse. Like, if he, like, had done other things with Muriel, he might not have come home, is what Grandpa's get back to. And so, Grandpa really tries to, like, get this into their heads. But at the same time, I feel like he also loosens up a little bit. Like, there's this one part where, like, they're talking about the fairies and about how, like, some of their personality traits and how they're very vain. And how, when, like, the fountains and the bird baths are full, they will stare at their reflections for hours. And Seth makes the joke, is Kendra a fairy? And Grandpa, rather than, like, being stern, he, like, bites his lip and he's like...
Try not to laugh.
Like,
he's
try
like,
not to laugh.
Sorry.
Like, ignore that comment. But, like, Kendra's like... Okay,
Kendra just kind of rolls her eyes. It's like, oh, man.
Continue the conversation. Grandpa gets his composure back, and they continue. But you really see, like, a little bit more of a, like, I don't think Grandpa would have laughed as much about that.
It's kind of like, Kendra's kind of like, man, maybe they are related.
Like, we really get to see kind of Grandpa's fun size. Like, later on, he plays with the bubbles and the fairies.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, like, before, he wasn't able to interact with the kids as well because... he was dancing around the secret, and so was Dale, and so was Lena. Although Lena did it a lot more gracefully than everybody else, let's be honest.
I think Dale gets an F for in my grade.
Grandpa gets a C-. He passed.
Yeah, well, like, Grandpa was, like, only trying to allude to the fact there was something mysterious. Dale was like, this milk is not
bad
for you.
It's bad. Salmonella, scurvy.
Kendra's like, okay, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, sure, bud. Guinea pig. So that's gotta be that's my Kendra moment for the episode. The fact that she goes, "Oh, Seth, I need a guinea pig."
Well, and also she doesn't even say him that it's a guinea pig. She makes him think that she already drank it, and she's
like, "It's a cool thing."
Yeah, and then he's like, "Oh, well, then I have to try it too."
She tricks him into it.
Yeah,
like,
which is really funny.
I love that. And also, but like at the same time, later on, once they figure it out, my other contestant for this Kendra moment was the fact that, like, Seth, of course, as soon as he knows that there's magical monsters and everything surrounding him, he's like, well, no way in heck am I staying in the yard now.
Yeah.
And Kendra knew it. Do you want to talk about this part? I know you really liked it.
Oh, yeah. So this is at the beginning of chapter 6. Not the beginning.
Is it Maddox?
Just kidding. Yeah. It's in chapter 6, which is Maddox. Page 93 and 94. Seth goes out dressed in his camouflage t-shirt because,
Iconic.
That will hide you from everything.
With his cereal box
cereal box emergency kit. And then Kendra's like, where are you going? And Seth is like, out into the woods.
Duh.
He's
already in the
these
woods.
Magical creatures.
He's already 10 feet in there.
Yeah, exactly.
He's gone. And Kendra's like,
so funny.
Nah. Continue.
And so, Kendra's like, well, why are you stupid? Like, Grandpa just told us about these real reasons of why we don't need to go into the woods, because we could die, and so you should not go out into the woods. And then Seth's like, whatever.
Grandpa goes everywhere.
Yeah, and he says, like, adults always underestimate kids, and he's just like, I'll be fine. Like, I can handle myself. They just have this, like, funny conversation, and then Kendra's like, he knew you went into the woods last time. He knew we drank the milk. How would he not know that you're going again?
And of course he blames Kendra.
And then he blames Kendra. He's like, you're bad luck.
It rubbed off on me, and I'm
Yeah.
like, honey.
And then this is probably one of my favorite Kendra quotes from these chapters. She says, your secret agent skills need some work. A good start might not be wearing your camouflage shirt every time you go exploring. And Seth says, I need to hide from the dragons. Like, duh, Kendra. Like,
What else would I be doing? Why else would
So
I need this
funny.
camouflage shirt?
and then he says, like, the stuff in his emergency kit will save him.
Rubber bands, whistles, mirrors, cigarette lighter, and firecrackers.
They'll think I'm a wizard.
The fact that I think he actually believes
I think he does. I think he believes that it would.
And like
Yeah.
he like even like he's like, I have a fairy skull that I nicked from Grandpa's office. They'll
Yeah,
think
that.
twice before they mess with me.
And she's like, oh, yeah, the skull the size of, like, a thumbnail. That will be
Oh, you'll really
terrifying.
scare him off. I mean, but she is successful this time. Kendra's like, no, if you go out there, I'm going to Grandpa, because like I love how the contrast, because in the first section of the first episode that we talked about, Kendra, she knows he's going out. He's wearing his camouflage t-shirt. He's got his
Mhm.
cereal box. She knows where he's going, but she trusts that he's not going to be stupid enough and that it's safe enough that he won't get like hurt.
Yeah.
And so she lets him go. And even when Dale asks her, "Where's your brother?" she's like, "Nah, I think he's in the house."
Yeah.
She covers for him, bare minimum. But this time, she's like, "No, you could die. I am not going to let you go off in there when
Mhm.
Grandpa has given us now very, very good reasons as to why that's a bad idea."
Yeah.
So I really like the difference, like, because we have two very similar situations, just with a
Yeah.
lot of different context. One, she covered for him. One, she's covering him. Like, no.
Yeah. She's like, no. This time, I'm not going to let your stupidity prevail.
hmm She's like, this time I'm letting my reason be in charge here.
Yeah.
hmm
Big sister moment.
Yes, quality moment. But yes, we also have some thickening plot in several different regards in this section. We know that Grandma Sorensen is a little bit more her situation is a little bit more complicated than we were led to believe. She's not visiting, to quote Kendra, Aunt whoever in Missouri, but we don't know exactly what's happening to her. We know
Yeah.
that there's something going on, but we don't know exactly what.
Mm-hmm.
We get some Lena backstory, which
Yes.
I love, because it
Yes.
becomes so important later on in
It
the
is.
series.
It's so good.
It's so beautiful.
It's
I
so
love
good.
I love her
I
story.
do love the love story of Lena and Patton Burgess.
Mm-hmm.
So we get introduced to Patton Burgess, who later, becomes very
Very.
popular with people. We don't need to talk
For
about that.
good reason.
Yeah.
But we can move on. So, to summarize their stories, so basically Patton Burgess was a groundskeeper at Fablehaven. He took care, a caretaker at Fablehaven a long time ago. I think
Like 100 years ago.
100 something ago.
Yeah, 1880
Yeah.
something, I think.
I think that's what it was, 1890. I don't know. And so, he becomes enamored with the naiads that live in the pond that Kendra and Seth had visited. He visits there often. He messes with them because, of course, naiads, what they do, they try to like lure people into the water, grab them, pull them down to drown. That's what they do.
Yeah.
So Patton, he knows this, but he's still fascinated by them. He builds a boathouse. He makes some sturdy boats, and he like almost toys with them. Like he
Mhm.
like he's constantly out of reach for them. But he becomes fascinated with one naiad in particular, and it's not to the end of the story that we find out that was Lena, and he like woos her. He like serenades her with a violin. He talks to her, makes her promises to what life would be like, because naiads can leave the water and become mortal,
Mhm.
but which to them, like, because in the water they're pretty much immortal, they will never die. But like Patton's like, but you can come live with me and have this amazing life. I promise I'll take care of you. I will love you and everything. And it's like he's like woos her. And eventually, one day, her affections are put to the test because he makes a mistake. He falls in the water, and the naiads are about to
Drown him.
him.
Yeah.
And she says, "No." And I like this because she could have just rescued him. She could have just rescued him and thrown him out of the pond
Yeah.
and stayed. But no, she chooses to leave with him. I think it's like at that moment where she has to choose. She's like, "Wait, no, I actually love him and I want to be with him.
Yeah.
I don't want to see him die." Sadly, she still has to because she ages a lot slower than he does, which is why she's still alive 100 and something years later.
Yeah.
But like she gets to have she gets to have a life with him.
And I think she says that they had like 50 or 60 years of marriage, so that's still like
Yeah.
quite a bit, at least for for Patton, not for Lena. But then she goes off and like travels the world, like literally like everywhere, and has any sort of job you could ever think of. And so I think she's a really interesting character because she started off as like a magical creature, but was restricted to just living in the pond, and so didn't know or didn't even care about what life could actually be like because everything was what they wanted in the pond. But then when she gets out, she's like, I need to take this opportunity to like
so she
experience
lives
life.
She lives, she travels, she does everything. And I really like how like what you're talking about. I love what she says about the difference between being in the pond and having left. Like, because she almost can't even remember. Yeah. Is what she says. Like, she says mortality is a totally different state of being. It wasn't just her, like, physicality that changed. It was her mentality. Like, when she was, like, she looks back now and she sees life as a naiad as being, like, a blur. I think she describes
it was like a dream.
A million-year blink.
Yeah.
Is what she said, I think. And once she met Patton, though, she was able to kind of differentiate time because she started to look forward to his visits and look back in affection at when he had visited in the past.
Yeah.
And that's what it kind of gave her that sense of time that she had been missing. And so she kind of like is able to have like this duality of understanding like what's it like to be immortal and yet at the same time so narrow-minded, being confined to such a small space. Whereas being mortal, having the difficulties of life, like aging, like she's starting to get on in years even now, like she ages slowly, but not, like she still ages. But she gets to have like this amazing life that she looks back on and she loves. She's like, I don't regret it. She doesn't regret having left it. She doesn't regret having to die one day because she got to have this life with the man that she loved. And then after that, she had all those experiences that otherwise she would never have had.
Yeah. But I do think there is one, not really regret, but she doesn't like the effects of mortality in that she's aging. That is one thing that she says she wished wasn't part of
it's her
mortality.
Biggest downside.
Yes. But I think, like, the story of Lena and Patton show, like, very early on in the story, a very interesting concept of, like, humans interacting with these magical creatures and how their actions like can change each other. And I think that's a part of like the development of the lore of this story is how these interactions between humans and magical creatures evolve. They change each other.
Because like one of Grandpa's like first things that he explains about magical creatures is that they are stagnant. They are not good. They are not evil. They just are. They have their natures. Like we talk about fairies. The fairies are vain and they make stuff pretty because that's what they do. They're not good. They're not bad, but they exist and they'll hurt you, and they will hurt you.
And then you have the brownies who they repair things and stuff, but Grandpa says that they don't do it out of kindness. They do it because it's in their nature that they want to create, they want to repair. They don't do it. They just
like fixing things.
Yeah, they just like fixing things. It's not for the benefit of the people in the house, so they do benefit from it. It is because that is just how they are.
And like the naiads, like Kendra, when she hears like they pull people down to drown, she's like, oh my gosh, that's so cruel. And Grandpa's like, to them, it's not. To them, it's the same as you killing a fly.
Yeah.
Or like crushing an ant. Like our lives are blinks to them. So to them, it's amusing. But to us, it's so different. And I just love that, like, we see the two mindsets starting to come to light here.
Yeah.
It gets way deeper as we go into, like, farther into the series, which makes me excited to talk about. But I like what we have here with just, like, the introduction. It's very simple, yet very profound if you really think about it.
Yeah. I really like that he's setting the foundation for, like, how these interactions between these two, like, groups honestly sets foundation for a lot of things later in the book and in the series, and I really, really like that.
Indeed.
And speaking of fairies, we have the traveling fairy broker,
Mhm.
Maddox.
Exactly.
Maddox is quite the interesting character
Indeed.
because for a living he goes off into, I don't know, the wilds or the preserves and whatever, and like traps fairies and takes them and goes around the world and sells them. And Seth is very
Very intrigued.
by
It's
this
like-
job.
I think his first question is like, "Are you looking for an apprentice?"
Yeah.
Like, I'm down. I'll volunteer. But
Volunteer tribute.
I thought about making that joke. I knew you'd do it for me. But and so we get a little bit of extra like world building as well as to like the actual world. Like Kendra asks, like, how many preserves are there? Like Fablehaven, and they're like, oh, there are dozens. Like that are run by caretakers like Grandpa, who are trying to preserve these. Like as like humans have expanded and their populations have grown, magical creatures have like fled to these preserves. So I really like the distinction. Like these preserves are not prisons. They're not meant to be prisons where like these animals are caged away. Like Maddox, it's almost like capturing mustangs out on the out on the plains and like bringing them in because they can't survive. There's not enough resources for them to survive. It's not an act of cruelty. It's a humane thing, and then they're distributed so that they can like have all the things they need to eat and like space to move around because they can't survive out in the outside world anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That's the kind of the concept I get.
And like another thing I think that's interesting about that is that like in the world they used to believe in like these things, but now as the world becomes less and less inclined to believe in magical creatures or magic at all, you know, it really wasn't a place for the magical creatures, so they created these preserves to protect them and give them a place, preserve them, give them a place to be.
Exactly.
Exist.
And so Maddox, he goes out into the woods and he like finds fairies. Like we get to see some of his more favorite finds, like fairies that have like wings on their ankles instead of their backs, like furry ones.
Yeah.
And then his magnum opus, his crown jewel, the gin harp, which early like this early like it's so super like it's super cool just to see like the little things.
Yeah.
Like this beautiful golden fairy with a beautiful voice. Where the only other it was thought that there was only ever one. She has her own shrine in the Gobi Desert or something, and so Maddox finds another one. He's like, well, looky here, look what I got.
Yeah.
And so
exotic.
Yeah, and like Maddox is like, I could probably retire off the money I'm gonna get for her. But yeah, so it's just super cool to see like that aspect of it as well. We see the preserves, and now we also see kind of like the business side, and so it's interesting.
And another interesting world building that is brought up in this chapter is that we learn of the existence of something called the Society of the Evening Star, which is
important.
a pretty big thing, considering that the next book is called The Rise of the Evening Star. So,
yes.
I like that these chapters start to like we're introduced to magical creatures at first, but then we realize that it's not just within this preserve of Fablehaven, that it is literally a whole new world, and that there are and that there are other people involved. It's not just contained to their little place at Fablehaven, that it is global, and that there's like conflict within it too, and that brings up some really interesting ideas.
Yeah, we have the Society of the Evening Star, which are described as a group that seek to overthrow the preserves.
Yeah.
And like to use the darker entities inside them for their own gain. And so Grandpa, of course, is concerned about this. We find out that there has been some interest in Fablehaven, he's warned that they might know where Fablehaven is, which is really bad, because these preserves are supposed to be very well hidden to prevent this, and that they might have a spy on the inside. And so Grandpa is slightly concerned. He hides it from the kids, and so we don't get much, if I recall correctly, in this book.
Yeah.
We get there's so many breadcrumbs that I totally forgot about.
I know, like rereading through these, I'm like, oh my gosh, they talk about the society this early.
They talk about patent virgins.
They talk about patent virgins. I'm like, whoa.
Like so many name drops happen that you don't realize are so significant until later on.
Yeah.
And there's just so many little things, and I love it.
Yeah.
It's like that's my favorite writing style is when authors just sprinkle in little tiny details, little obscure things that just make you want more. They're just like, well, what does that mean? I want to know. So Society of the Evening Star, talk about them, and it's just
then this chapter ends kind of funny because they're like, all right, time to go to bed for anyone who's under the age of 30. And then Seth is like, what? He has such FOMO. He's like, you can't, wait, what? You can't just banish me upstairs. I want to hang out and, like,
talk about
fairies and learn about this new world. And they're like, nope, go to bed.
We have negotiations.
Yeah. And then Maddox, the way that he says, no matter what you might think you hear, just remember we aren't having fun.
Although I'd say they were.
Which is, oh yeah, that was like such sarcasm.
Like, they looked like we see the aftermath, like a lot of broken stuff, like, and it's just like, yeah, you were totally having fun. And
we
like,
even learned that there were satyrs.
Yeah, we even learned that there were satyrs. I just find it amusing as well. Like, Grandpa posted Lena on the stairs.
Yeah. The she's like reading a book, being like, I just like, the way I picture this in my mind is that she's reading and she like, they like open the door, and she's just like, go back to bed, and like doesn't even like look up from her book.
Doesn't even acknowledge it. Just like turns a page.
It's like the classic like mom that like has the eyes in the back of her head and just knows when her children are like trying to do something wrong. Lena has that same instinct of like, nope. So funny.
No, but yeah, so we love Lena. Lena's queen. But then we learn, as we continue, as they like clean up from the party, Seth has been inspired by Maddox.
Maybe not in the best way.
No. I mean, if he was going to actually turn into a career, fantastic. But as an 11-year-old boy who is very impressionable and wants to prove himself as being like good at catching and good at like being on this preserve, it's very bad. So basically, Seth gets it in his head that I want to be like Maddox. I'm going to catch a fairy, and he
It's as simple as that, isn't it, Seth?
And so he tries various
Tactics.
methods, yes, and he manages to get one. Catches this beautiful little fairy with dragonfly wings.
Which honestly is surprising to me that he
actually got one.
able to get a fairy. Like
later on, Grandpa's just as surprised. Like, I did not expect him to try, and I did not expect him to be able to be successful.
Yeah, that's really like, oh man, this kid is a little more capable than I thought he was.
Yeah. A little fairy, no taller than his little finger. She had fiery red hair and iridescent dragonfly wings. Seth had captured his prize, the perfect pet, is I believe how he describes it.
Yes.
And so he is so proud of himself, but he doesn't tell anybody. Like, no, he's like, no, I gotta keep this to myself. And that night, he checks on the fairy after Kendra's already asleep, and he looks at her, and she like, and they can't communicate. She doesn't like, or I guess like she can't talk to him.
Yeah.
But she is like just begging, like
Yeah,
she is like pleading with like her body language, and Seth's like.
He's like, it's okay, it's okay.
It's okay. And he's like, he even says, like, I'll let you go tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
Like, he's like, he feels bad. Like, he's like, I'll let you go tomorrow.
Yeah.
Sadly, tomorrow is too late.
Yes, because as Seth learns the next day that there are consequences to leaving a fairy inside overnight. And the fairy is, because she was left inside overnight, is consequently turned into what is called an imp, which is a fallen fairy. So, completely different appearance to a fairy, but
their gray skin, like their wings fall off. Like, I think they have fangs. Like, it's just like they completely like fall to the dark side. For lack of a better word.
Well, and like what Grandpa says later, and I think this chapter or the next chapter, he says that like imps and fairies are not different in personality because they're still, fairies are very vain, but so are imps. But because fairies fall and become these like ugly little creatures, it just turns them even more spiteful and hateful.
Because they're so vain. They remember having been beautiful, so they look at themselves and they're like, I'm ugly, I'm disgusting.
Yeah.
I feel like that might be relevant to today, just like
are we pulling out a life lesson out of here?
Mean, isn't that what the point of this podcast?
Sure.
Well, I feel like the message speaks for itself.
Okay.
Like Grandpa's like they're the exact same. Like the minds didn't change at all.
Yeah.
It's just we see the negative effects of that mentality, that vanity, that's puffed up. Like I'm so pretty, I'm better than anyone else. Please tell me how pretty I am.
Yeah. And
we see it's vice, and it's just. I feel like that can be applied to many people today. I will leave it at that, though.
Yeah, no.
But because fairies are so vain, they see they find out what happens to this imp. She is like the imp escapes and runs off. Fairies find out, and they all get scared because if it happened to one fairy, it could happen to them.
Any of them.
It could happen to anyone. So they decide to teach Seth a lesson by pulling a treehouse out of a tree while he's inside of it, chasing him across the lawn and into a pool, and turning him into a half-formed, disfigured walrus.
Yes.
That breathes out of its stomach.
Talk about consequences.
Yeah. Seth really gets to feel the heat on this one.
Yeah, and I can't even imagine what's running through like Grandpa's mind as he like runs up onto the scene and
See,
is
the
like
flashing lights.
the flashing lights, the fairies, the fallen treehouse, Kendra screaming, and then he sees what he's like, oh, that's Seth. What is going on here? Oh my gosh! And then like the fairies talk to him, and then he's like, well, crap. I brought these kids into this preserve, into this magical world, and 1 or 2 days later, this happens. Like,
and it's hard because you can't really place the blame solely on anyone.
No, you can't.
Grandpa could have explained everything more, but at the same time, he didn't understand quite how far Seth was willing to go.
Yeah.
Kendra didn't know, so she wasn't able to hold Seth back,
Mm-hmm.
and Seth didn't know what the consequences of what he did would be.
Exactly.
He just wanted to have a fairy. He wanted to prove that he could do it.
Yeah.
And the fairies, they were just scared, and they were reacting to what was a horrible, horrible fate for one of their own.
Yeah.
Scared of what could happen to them. And they retaliate. And so nobody has the full blame, and
That's
that
true.
makes it so much better, I'd say. Grandpa's like, well, now what? Because he has 2 weeks left with these kids, and now one of them's a walrus.
Yeah. And the thing for Seth that, like, sucks is that it was, like, a crime, but it was a crime committed in ignorance because he did not know the rules of, like, fairies having to be outside at least part of the night or else they turn into imps. Like, he did not know. But that, I think Grandpa says that what this teaches is that what you don't know can hurt you.
Can still hurt you.
Ignorance
is not
bliss. Ignorance
Exactly.
can lead to dire and even mortal consequences.
Exactly. And Seth really gets to feel that. And so Grandpa's faced with this conundrum as to how to fix Seth. And he has to do something that he does not want to do.
Yeah.
We gotta go back to the witch's shack.
Back to Muriel, who we learned her name earlier in these chapters. And her backstory a bit is that she was the wife of a caretaker in Fablehaven from like a couple 100 years ago, who was also very curious, very inquisitive, like someone we might know. Whose name starts with S and ends in F.
But yeah, she ended up going. That shouldn't be so funny. Why is it so funny? Continuing on, she ended up wandering to areas that, as Grandpa would put it, had more unsavory characters, and she, I guess, even more literally turned to the dark side. So she started learning witchcraft from these demons, and her husband was forced, and like she actually tried to stage a overthrow of the treaty, of the laws that keep
of the preserve itself.
Of the preserve itself, with some of like the more demonic residents. Yeah. And so her husband is forced to imprison her in this little shack, and so we get it kind of explained why she's there. So she has to be there, and she originally has a rope with 13 knots. Yeah. And that was what kept her in prison there. Yes. Like, it wasn't like wrapped around her or anything. It was just there.
It's like the magical binds of her prison.
Exactly. But there's the loophole. Like, if you blow on the knot, it looses, and she can use that magic to grant a favor. Yeah. So over the years, 11... I had to do the math really quick in my head. 11 of those knots have been loosed. And she's down to 2.
And once all the knots are gone, she's free.
She's free to go and run amok and cause havoc.
Or do whatever she wants.
And so, but Grandpa, he knows that he has a very small time frame. Yeah. And he's got to get Seth back. And he knows that the only person with that power and that he can reach in that time frame is her.
Yes.
And he's like, I never wanted her to get down to 1 knot. but that's his only option
Yeah.
to get Seth back to normal. So they take him out there.
In a wheelbarrow.
Yeah, in a wheelbarrow. Poor Dale, he's got to lug him all the way out
He's
there.
like, I'm just thinking about what Dale is thinking. He's like, okay,
because Dale's normal.
Seth. Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
a normal guy.
Yeah.
He's not a fallen
Dale-
dyad.
Out of everyone in this series, I would say Dale is the most normal person.
I would concur.
Yeah.
I would definitely concur with that.
Yeah.
He's just to quote another normal guy, I'm just a guy with a boomerang.
Boomerang.
I didn't ask for all this flying and magic.
True.
Another quality show with another quality character whose name starts with S.
Yeah. Also, when you said that she was like with like the darker side of inhabitants, I almost said the dark side of the Force.
I think we've made too many Star Wars jokes.
I know.
But
So anyway, they're making
yeah,
their way to
continue.
Muriel's house. Shack.
And
whatever,
so
not
she
a house.
ribs them a lot, like, oh, the fair-minded adventurer finally his mistakes have finally caught up to him.
Mhm.
Like,
She's taunting them.
She's
is
so
what she's
bitter.
doing.
She's so bitter.
Well, she's also super smug because she knows that Grandpa
Yeah.
has to come to her, and
Mhm.
she is so excited because
Now she's down to
there's
one.
only one more obstacle in her way from getting free.
So continuing on, so Seth gets healed, and he is very humbled. He is very, very humbled.
It's like,
By
kid,
the
you've
six-
done messed up.
And Grandpa's like, I know you didn't mean to do it, but
Mhm.
this is a perfect example as to what's at stake.
Yeah.
Like, you could have been trapped like that for months until we could find some way to fix you if we weren't, like, hindered by the time frame.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, if you've learned to be more careful and, like, considerate now
Yeah.
and more obedient, maybe some good will have come out to this experience.
Yeah.
But, and then Kendra, of course, has to throw in a quip, as she is so wont to do. I learned something too. Humans and walruses should never mix.
Something I just kind of want to think of is like, and we might have already talked about this a little bit, but just kind of like the chapters start with like the discovery and like kind of the wonder of these magical creatures. But then through these couple chapters, it kind of goes from like the wondrous like part of it to the reality of these magical creatures and like how dangerous they actually can be. And so that's kind of what I like about these is that, you know, especially Seth, but also Kendra learns the danger of interacting with these magical creatures, even something as small and seemingly harmless as a fairy.
Yeah, and one that seems so easily contained as well. Like we get explained, like with Maddox, like if you catch a fairy, she can't use her magic against you. Like if she's kept in an enclosed space,
Yeah.
she can't use her magic against you. But and so like to Seth, that makes it sound like, oh, that'd be cool, perfect pet. But he doesn't understand everything. But maybe we should move on to our next portion of the show, our Sethisms. So yes, in case a reminder is necessary, our Sethisms are our favorite Seth quotes from the section of the reading. And so I have a couple that I really liked, and one of mine was on page 76. So they've drunken the milk, they've figured out the mystery, and they're talking with Grandpa about now the dangers. And Seth is being kind of incredulous, like, are you kidding me? You saying it's dangerous? I've been into the woods far away 4 times, and nothing's happened. And Grandpa's just like, 4 times? And Seth's like, so he like backtracks a little. All before the warning.
He's like, don't make me be punished again.
Like, oh my gosh, like what am I gonna do with this kid?
Yeah.
And then the next one is well, I guess this next one is more of a Kendraism. Grandpa's once again warning them about like about a groundskeeper who went where he should not have gone, and died because of it. And Kendra gives Seth a side eye, goes, in other words, he had no respect for what was off limits. And like you can tell, like both her and Grandpa are just staring at him. He's like, and Seth just brushes it off, and he's like, oh yeah, so Queen of the Fairies?
Yeah, he's like, changing the subject.
I can just see Kendra face palming, like, oh my gosh, this kid's gonna get himself killed.
Yeah.
But yes, so those are my 2 that I just like chuckled at. Do you have a couple?
Yeah. Well, I already read one of them where like he's like going off into the woods or trying to, and Kendra's like, stop. And then there was one other one on
I love their
page-
contrast. Like, Seth gets bored with the fairies so quickly, whereas Kendra's like, but just stop and smell the roses. And he's like, but why roses if there's dragons?
Uh-huh.
Sorry, wait, continue on.
You're good. So it's when Seth is trying to catch the fairies with the pool skimmer, and Kendra says, "You shouldn't do that." Kendra said from the pool. "Why not? Maddox catches them out in the wild." Kendra corrected. These already belong to Grandpa. It's like hunting lions at the zoo. Maybe hunting lions at the zoo would be good practice.
He says as he fails multiple times more
Yeah,
epically.
I just love that. It's just kind of like a funny maybe I should go do that, or
I really like
sarcasm.
the fairies don't do anything. Like to him, he's like
Yeah.
he's just a pest.
Yeah.
To them, he's like just nothing. Like
Mhm.
yeah, he's like trying to catch them in this pool skimmer, but like until he actually catches one of them, which is a shock to everyone, he's not a threat. Like they don't retaliate, not anyway. Just another clue into their nature.
Yeah. Oh, I remembered one thing I wanted to talk about.
Do tell.
So as I was so I listened to these. I like to listen to them. And as I was listening to the audiobook, I was just something I'd never thought about before is the way that he writes the perspectives of these chapters, because he goes from Kendra to Seth to Kendra to Seth a lot in these chapters,
Sometimes
back
really
and forth.
quickly.
Yeah, back and forth in the same chapter. And so I really like the way that he does it, because it feels very seamless and very kind of like it makes sense. And I really like how it makes the story flow, because we just go kind of back and forth between Kendra and Seth, and that I just really like that kind of style of writing, and I really like it.
Yeah, it really helps you get in their mindsets very effectively. We're not just with Kendra, we're not just with Seth. It really just feeds into the co-protagonist.
Yeah,
angle.
they're both the main characters,
both the
and
main
we
characters.
get to know them and know their process of thinking and how they see the world, and I really like that in these chapters.
I like it. All right, well, I think that's just about it for today. So once again, that was chapters 4 through 8, Journal of Secrets and Retaliation. And I really liked these chapters. They take a lot of material and condense it very effectively, and in a way that's still very enjoyable.
Mm-hmm.
You get the positive, you get the negatives, you get some world building, everything is all mixed into one really nicely. And
Yeah, I really like these chapters that we just went over, because they're just kind of the setup for the rest of the story and some key themes that go throughout the rest of the series. And so I really like that.
very effective. Well done, Brandon. We're fans.
Obviously, we're fans.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Yeah.
I don't know if we introduced ourselves at the beginning, so I'm Jessica.
I'm Megan, and just as a little goodbye to everyone, a little outro. Thank you all for listening to the Knights of the Dawn podcast. If you have any feedback or comments, feel free to email us at knightsofthedawnpodcast@gmail.com, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is also called Knights of the Dawn Podcast, to stay up to date on any new episodes. And you can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Until next time, thanks for listening. This is Megan.
This is Jessica.
See you later.